Right. Happy LGBTQ plus History Month. Thank you for joining us on this topic, which I hope will be educational and enlightening. I've pasted a link in the chat to a document that Evan, Elizabeth, and I myself put together with a glossary of terms you might hear today that you may not be familiar with. There are also some links in the document with further resources. To honor this month, I want to touch on the history of the word queer. I'm an elder millennial. My coming of age was in the 90s and early 2000s, and pretty firmly in the generation of reclaiming what had been used as a slur. To me, it also has the bonus of being an umbrella term, making room for inclusivity and intersectionality. In order to stop myself from rambling and reinventing the wheel, I found this short video by Tyler Ford, editor with Them, that briefly covers the history of the word queer.
From its humble beginnings in the 1600s to its still controversial use today, the word queer has always been, well, queer. Queer can mean something different to everyone who uses it, and we love it for its versatility and its resilience. So, how much do you really know about the history of the word queer? The Oxford English Dictionary credits the 16th century Scottish people for coming up with the word queer in the flighting of Dunbar and Kennedy, a poetic war of words that involved accusations of sexual perversion or weakness. Picture a rap battle, but in kilts. Hey, here comes our own queer clerk, one rogue battler tells another, but the guy's not necessarily gay, just eccentric and suspicious. The first person to use the word queer as a homophobic slur was John Sholto Douglas, the 9th Marquis of Queensberry in 1894. His son Francis was the private secretary to Lord Rosebery, and the two were rumored to be carrying on a scandalous affair. After Francis died, his father wrote a letter to his younger son, Lord Alfred Douglas, denouncing snob queers like Rosebery and blaming the Lord for the elder son's death. The thing is, Alfred himself was one of acclaimed author and so-called first modern homosexual Oscar Wilde's literary muses, and they wrote each other love letters for years. When Douglas found out about the affair, he made it his personal mission to take down Wilde, and it worked. Wilde was later arrested, eventually found guilty, and sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. Other, crooked, and bad became synonyms for queer for years, and the use of the word queer reached its height of popularity in the late 1920s, as the term also became widely known in America. But New York's Stonewall riots in 1969 marked the beginning of the gay rights movement in the US. And from the start, members of the community called themselves queer as an act of defiance, as they celebrated their right to love who they want, even in the face of police violence. Yet that age of sexual liberation in the 1970s turned into tragedy in the 1980s. More than 16,000 Americans died of AIDS-related complications in just 5 years, most of them gay men. The AIDS crisis sparked an era of activism in a time of grave crisis, and this had a large influence on young activists, who took up the word queer as a badge of courage. This culminated in the founding of the Queer Nation in 1990 as AIDS continued to ravage the LGBTQ community. And at New York Pride in 1990, they passed out, "Queers read this. Being queer is not about a right to privacy. It is about the freedom to be public, to just be who we are." For the first time, the world was hearing, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." The work of these queer activists inspired a shift in art, culture, and academia, as institutions questioned the heterocentric norms of Western culture. With the rise of the internet came digital queer communities and a new wave of LGBTQ activism. Bills like Prop 8 in California and the larger national fight for marriage equality moved a new generation of activists to organize and fight for equality. The internet's ability to connect people and spread information at a rapid pace cemented the term queer into a modern generation's lexicon. Now, a wide range of LGBTQ people and other sexual minorities call themselves queer as a more expansive and expressive umbrella term for their sexualities and genders. Also, not everyone in the LGBTQ community loves the word queer. There are plenty of trans folks and older gays and lesbians who just don't jive with the term. But as our movement evolves beyond just the L and the G in our ever-growing acronym, the proliferation of the term has been seen by some as an overwhelming positive, reflecting a more inclusive approach to our politics and our community. We're all stronger together, and queerer than ever.
I hope that this brief look into the history of the word queer gives some insight into my thinking for the title of this service. Now let's dig into local experiences with our panelists. The age of the internet and greater acceptance has certainly made being a queer person a bit less less difficult than in years past, but there are still challenges. Today, we'll be hearing from 3 locally queer individuals, Evan, Elizabeth, and myself, who will be sharing their individual experiences, and hopefully, if we have time, followed by time for questions for our panelists and congregational dialogue. First up, we have Evan, an openly bisexual, polyamorous, gender apathetic Black woman living in a predominantly white, conservative Republican region. Take it away, Evan.
Hi. Everyone can hear me okay? Not too much echo? I got thumbs up from people, yay. Hi. Good morning and hello. My name is Evan, as Tara said, and I'd like to clarify a few terms specifically before I start. The first one is gender apathetic, which to me really means anything goes. I have no preference in identity. So I generally go by she, her pronouns, but any pronouns are okay with me. And if I am talking too fast, please say something or have Tara flag me down. I also want to clarify polyamorous, which is consensually engaging in multiple relationships at the same time. And you'll hear me refer to it as polyam as well. I also want to clarify biphobia and fatphobia. Biphobia is discrimination specifically against bisexuals, either being not gay enough or engaging in a straight passing relationship where they are seen as not gay enough, or, oh, you're just straight, or having been told pick a side. Fat phobia is just being, oh, just lose the weight, just work out, you're lazy, and things I'll call body gatekeeping. Also, lastly, between romantic and platonic relationships, romantic is more, think The Notebook kind of love, while platonic is best friends forever kind of love. Anyway, on to the story. As Tara said, my name is Evan, and I have never made a decision in my life. At least that's what the internet tells me, because I am bisexual, polyamorous, and I can't decide what gender I identify with, so I don't. This predates my time in Culpeper, way back in the early 2000s. I was the flamboyant girl who over-exaggerated everything. In middle school, I was just starting to realize that, hey, I like girls and boys. Although I preferred boys, but I wanted to make sure that people knew it was okay to like either. I had hoped that by being me, as loud and extra as I was, it helped people feel more comfortable about being themselves quietly and accept who they were. This stayed constant all the way through graduations and my failed attempt at college. And then my mom and I moved into Culpeper. This was in 2017. It was quiet, mundane, kind of bland, and surprisingly Hispanic heavy. It didn't take me long to start feeling out the area for somewhere to hang out, to meet people, and to make friends, and maybe even date. So you know what that means? It's time for Tinder. Only a few days of swiping before I realized something. There was only one type of guy here. There was camouflage, Confederate flags, a mandatory picture of holding a fish or on top of a mountain with a lifted truck behind them, and something about a former president who felt cheated about not being elected or reelected. And then just ask. The women weren't much better. Lots of live, laugh, love posters, or looking for a third for their hubby to share. Long hair and beach pictures, tiny bikinis, and more pictures holding fish on a mountain. And a lot of people that were not like other girls. But I still tried. At first, it was because I was fat. The first line in my profile was specifically that my weight was my weight, and I was not interested in any help, read shaming into losing weight. And after that, it was because I was polyamorous. Not long after I had moved, I met my first partner, Angel. He lives in California, but we decided to try a relationship anyway. And now it's been 4 years that we've been together. And people automatically thought that I was cheating because he was so far. But I would reassure them. I would tell them they could just ask. I would give them his phone number that he could just talk to them. But people still said no because polyamory was not natural in that case. It took forever, but I finally met someone wearing an Iron Giant shirt. He was also polyamorous, which saved me. My third obstacle was romantic versus platonic relationships. Iron Giant guy didn't want the romance that I did. Although I tried to let my relationships be whatever they want to be, I was looking for a romantic relationship. I'm a sucker for romance, the real cheesy flowers on a moonlight dinner kind of relationship. But he just wanted friends and a hookup. So back to Tinder it was. More fish, more fat phobia, more accusations of cheating. But I continued to persevere to look for love. The fourth obstacle I hit was the biphobia. If people didn't think I would cheat because I was polyamorous, it was because they saw I was bisexual. With men, they thought I would see a woman and immediately want to have sex with them. With women, they thought I was dirty for letting a man touch me. The only ones who remotely wanted me were people looking for a quote unquote unicorn, thinking it would spice up their bedroom life or fix their marriage. If I refused or wanted fair treatment in their relationship, or I said that I was not giving up my angel just to be included in their relationship, I was not worth it. Back to Tinder. Those 4 points continued for almost 3 years. I got super lucky to stumble into a funky restaurant where ironically I had my first date with the Iron Giant guy, where I got to meet Tara and a dozen or so queer people who were welcoming and loving. That safe space was my saving grace, and I wouldn't feel nearly as comfortable as I do now if I hadn't had an affinity for pasta. Getting to know Tara and her pool of nerds and their collection of board games made staying in town worth it. But the chips and bruises left behind by painful messages I got from the cesspool of Tinder lingered. Dating in this town felt impossible. It wasn't until late 2019 that I met my second partner of now almost 2 years. And yes, we met on Tinder. I now work at Walmart. I get to see a lot of those fish holders and not like other girls and the parents who raised them. Even though it's part of my job to be kind, I still hold my flamboyant personality close, and it shows that my customers do not like that. That I refer to my partners as partners, or that there's multiple of them, or that I'm openly polyamorous, sexual, and me, and that I'm not scared by their Christianity trying to save me. I want to continue to show people that they can be who they are, love who they want, let their relationships be whatever they feel is right for them. And although I've had multiple people stop me at my job to try to evangelize me, I can't see where their love comes from when they think that loving and that my way of loving is bad. So go ahead and ask me. I'm an open book. I want to share all of my experiences. I want to share all of my thoughts with people. And I want to learn how to love you. Yay. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you, Evan. That was really great. Thank you. And I'm so glad that I could be part of your story. So I forget sometimes that for some people, noodleheads meant just as much as it meant to me. So, all right. So next we have Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a transgender lesbian who identifies as butch and so presents fairly masculine for her gender. She's been out to friends and family for about 5 years and to coworkers and others for around 2, while slowly making her way through the legal and medical processes of transition. The floor is all yours, Elizabeth.
Thank you. So yes, I'm Elizabeth. Most of my friends just call me Liz. And yeah, I'm a transgender woman, which means that when I was born, I was assigned male at birth. Um, and in my mid-20s, I figured out that I was actually more comfortable identifying as a woman. And ever since then, I've been figuring out what steps I need to take and how to go through the processes in order to get, my body and legal documents to reflect that truth. Um, my life has been a really long and complicated one, even though I only figured out I was trans at the age of 25. It was pretty self-evident all the way back in elementary school. I had always been seen as effeminate and just odd and unusual, queer, one might say. um, and so it resulted in me getting bullied my entire school life. By the time I got to middle and high school, I was constantly being called gay. And this greatly upset me because I wasn't. I had absolutely no interest in guys. Turns out that I actually was gay. It's just that there was another piece missing in that puzzle, um, which was my gender. After I left high school, I had a little bit more time kind of to myself and being able to not always be pressured in this environment where I've got to focus on a million different things and I could start thinking about who I was and how I felt. And I very quickly just got disillusioned with the idea of gender. I realized that I liked the cut of a lot of women's clothes. I would get button-up shirts from the women's section instead of men's. I'd get pants and jeans that were skinnier and fit more to the form of my legs. And I became a massive fan of big long coats that would swish about as I walked. And in kind of my post high school years, early 20s, I started referring to my gender as peacock, because at that time I still hadn't even heard of transgender people. And it was just the best that I could think of to describe the feelings that I had. Anyway, because it took so long for me to even hear the concept of being transgender, it resulted in me, even after the point that I had learned that trans people exist and who they are, I had gotten so used to seeing myself in a particular way, and more importantly, in just writing off all these weird things about me, I had stopped analyzing them and thinking about them. I was just weird. Ultimately, in December of 2015, I believe it was. I had a coworker just ask me, so hey, don't take this the wrong way, but are you trans? To which I responded, no, it's more like I'm just a woman in a man's body, which is basically the textbook definition of being trans. About a week later, I realized this. And something that I'd like to say on this front is that it's not like I simply realized that I was trans and that was the end. I have been exploring my gender ever since. As was said in my introduction, I identify as butch, which is a sort of subcategory of lesbians. It's a long history to that in and of itself. I don't want to go off on a tangent. But butch women present generally more masculinely. Sometimes we'll even use male pronouns, he and him, even though we still identify as women. But it's very difficult to exist as a butch trans woman because I have this feeling of how I want to be as a woman, but I also want to be seen as a woman by other people. And when the two are in conflict with each other, because I am, I'm taking hormones now, but I'm fighting against 20 odd years of hormones pushing me towards being male. It's generally a lot easier for people to just see me as male. And trying to find a balance in between being true to my expression of my gender of being butch, and which is very closely connected to my being a lesbian as well. So wanting to present more masculinely, but still being seen as a woman, it creates this incredibly difficult balancing act that I have to take part in every single day. And I still don't know where exactly I want to fall on that spectrum and how to get there. But in the meantime, I just continue to explore how I feel about my gender and my expression in myself. A little while ago, I even considered identifying as non-binary, which is just an umbrella term for not being male or female. And I asked some friends to refer to me with they, them pronouns in addition to she, her. And I felt that was all right, but it didn't really fit me. And so I ended up dropping it. I had to point this out because I strongly encourage everyone to explore their gender, even if you wind up discovering that you are indeed just cis. Like I discovered that I was indeed just female and not non-binary. It still teaches you something about yourself. You get to learn more about yourself and be more conscious of who you are, your own gender, and how you relate to it. I personally find it much more fulfilling than had I just gone, I'm a woman, and so therefore I will be all of the stereotypical things that a woman is expected to be. So yeah, that's my story, I suppose.
Thank you so much, Liz. And I'm sorry I kept calling you Elizabeth.
Either one is fine, honestly.
Oh, okay. There was a lot of interconnectedness, and I feel like your story is different than the typical one that we hear about trans women. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to do my story as quick as I can so that we have some time for congregational dialogue. I feel like I have a very stereotypical bisexual story for my age group. Grew up in a Catholic family in a small town, wrote off my feelings for women as just really admiring them, and then openly dated men while shoving down those pining feelings for women due to fear. And then I married a man. Reflecting on my childhood and teenage years, I can clearly see the distinction, though, between those platonic and romantic feelings. I always said that I had two best friends in elementary school, but through the lens of experience, I had a best friend and a girl that I was so very in love with. I remember watching The Labyrinth and having all kinds of odd feelings whenever David Bowie or Jennifer Connelly came on the screen. And I don't think I've ever met anyone who had a crush on David Bowie and turned out straight. So I don't know how I went so long kidding myself. Looking back, even the boys and men that I dated weren't the ones that all of my straight friends thought were attractive. It's always been the gender non-conforming, the geeks, the closeted gays, and fellow bisexuals. The real clincher that made me face, at least to myself, that I wasn't just and could never be the straight A, straight laced, straight girl I felt that I should try to be, was my freshman year of high school. I was the only freshman on the yearbook staff, an accomplishment I was really proud of, as the teacher who ran the staff rarely allowed freshmen join, but I had been editor of the middle school yearbook. An exception was made. And that's where I fell for Marianne, senior, yearbook editor, field hockey and soccer captain, in all the honor societies, and president of the Happy Club. I called her the general and I followed every order. I tried to convince myself that it was just because she was everything that I aspired to be, and maybe that was part of it. But that doesn't explain dreaming of holding her hand and my heart fluttering and my stomach doing flips every time I saw her smile or heard her name. Being bisexual and married to a man, I often feel too queer for the cis het spaces and then not queer enough for the LGBTQ plus spaces. Playing a part in that is the fact that now that I'm thinking of it, I don't think I've actually ever come out. I think there might be some of that internalized biphobia at play. My sit hes passing relationship privilege makes me question the purpose of announcing my orientations. Does my experience really matter when there are so many LGBTQ plus people who face discrimination every moment of their lives? Would confirming my queerness be helpful to anyone, or is it purely self-centered motivation? On the other side of that same coin, though, have I not confirmed my queerness in order to retain those passing privileges? I'm nearly 40 now and still struggling with the answers to those questions. I still haven't made a big announcement, but I have decided over the years to not hide and just be me. Maybe I'll always be assumed to be an ally in those queer spaces. Maybe I'll always get the side eye in straight spaces. Maybe I'll never feel sure of my place as a semi-closeted, bisexual, gender apathetic. Thank you so much for that phrase, Evan, because it's perfect. Woman. I am, however, sure of one role in my life. My daughters have both had crushes on folks of multiple genders, and they've never once hesitated to share that with me or seemed to feel any shame in being their authentic selves. Sorry, or having those feelings. And I think that's pretty damn cool. So that's my story. I want to thank Evan and Elizabeth again for sharing their stories. All three of us share being some flavor of LGBTQ plus and living and or growing up in rural areas. But each of us have other aspects of our identities that lend toward different experiences. We'll now open the floor to congregational dialogue for, I think, maybe 5 or 7 minutes we should have time for. As with the joys and sorrows, if you'd like to speak, simply unmute yourself and begin talking. I'll only intervene if there's confusion about who began speaking first, which can happen with the weak internet connections, which we mentioned earlier. Please remember to mute yourself again after you have finished speaking. And I see Karen raising her hands.
Yes,
So if you'd like to go first.
sure. I'm just wondering if any of the three of you could share an example of an experience that you've had where someone was a good ally. What kinds of things go into being a good ally?
And this is one that I think is amazing. I will actually, one of my best friends was a closet, well, really questioning, a closeted lesbian for about 6 or so years. She was so confused, and I remember her being so scared when she did not know how she identified, who she liked. Was it okay to like another woman? And of course, I encouraged her to take her time to feel it out, but also to, you know, be herself. And one of our mutual friends at the time in high school was pretty homophobic, but watching other people around us kind of rally and say, hey, you don't know who you're talking about. You don't know who in this room could be gay, could be, closeted, could be, could be transgender. And what you are saying is shameful and hurtful, but you might not know who you are hurting. It could be the person next to you. It could be the person all the way across the room. But to have people who we weren't exactly friends with speak up and say, stop, that's hurtful. And even if you don't know, even if there's no one directly, you are directly saying it to, just saying it at all is enough to just say, that's too much, you need to stop. And so part of being a really good and really consistent ally is, it doesn't matter if you know someone in that room is a lesbian, is gay, is transgender, is non-binary. If you hear transphobia, homophobia, biphobia, just any kind of hateful or negativity around any LGBTQ space, go ahead and say something. But because by being quiet, you are also adding to that hurt of whoever that closeted person is, whoever that non-binary person is, even if they're out and they're transgender or they're out and they're, gay, you are hurting them because they will feel more alone because no one else is standing with them.
Thank you, Evan.
Yes, thank you.
And if I could throw in a quick little answer from the trans side of things in particular, people often ask about pronouns or have concerns as to how they should correct themselves if they end up using the wrong pronouns. And just one thing that I would say for that is the best way to handle it is just to be quick and just as soon as you catch it, correct yourself and move on the conversation. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just carry on like as though nothing happened, using the correct pronouns from that point on. Additionally, there's kind of a push to encourage people to include pronouns in introductions, even when they aren't around anyone that they can identify as being trans. it's become fairly standard for people to do this when there are people around that they know or can tell are trans. But when that happens, it kind of makes us feel like there's a spotlight on us, even if it's not being, even if everyone's going around and sharing their pronouns, when it's something that's only done when we're around, it's clear that it's being done because we're around. So yeah, I don't have any recommendations exactly into how best to turn this into a normalized behavior, but it's something to, I think, keep in mind.
Okay.
I've got Greg next.
Thank you. These were great presentations, all three of you. Thank you so much. I teach education courses, and one thing that was said, I think, was that it's great for the individual queer person when they come out, and also that it can be good for other people. I think someone said that, you know, because there's a sense of decreasing gender constraints. And I love that comment when I talk with students about what high school was like for them and things like that. And in addition to negative experiences from queer people, I will hear a young woman say, gee, I was afraid to seem too smart in calculus class. And that's a very gendered constraint. I've read transcripts from science classes where you see young men or boys who, instead of really being interested in understanding the science, they're interested in seeming as if they know more than they really do. So men who fake knowledge beyond their real knowledge because they feel like they have to be dominating in male, that's a gendered constraint. So there's so many dots to connect. The personal stories are so important, and affirming and defending queer people is important, and also thinking, what does it mean for all of us when we start to challenge these constraints? So thank you so much. This was great.
All right, I had Lisa raise her hand next.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this without crying. So big thanks to Karen and the whole welcoming committee for starting our expanding of our congregation and our areas of what we care about and what we can do action on. Oh, I'm going to cry anyway. Whenever we meet in person, and maybe we can do this virtually, I always stop at, near the coffee table with the welcoming LGBTQ welcoming sign that we have, certificate. It's so beautiful. I mean, I just think about how some of the queer people that I've known, the gay people that I've known, have struggled so much to fit in and find places where they belong, and it's so wonderful that we're a welcoming congregation, and yeah, big thanks to Karen and everyone else, and thank all of you, the speakers, and I hope that you consider us a welcoming group of people, and just it's been a privilege.
Is that Gary or Marcia that raised the hand? Go ahead, Gary.
Oh, I just want to express my incredible gratitude to Evan and Liz and Tara for doing this. I just think this is a beautiful experience. Thank you.
One more thing I forgot to say, sorry. Because of the horrible several years we had recently, the years have been bad for people who are different. I mean, my son is half Hispanic and he got a lot of threats on the school bus and things. But one good thing that's come out of all of this horror of the past few years has been the rural areas. I've just watched our LGBTQ plus groups just spring up out here, and finally everybody was like screw this, we're not afraid of all, we're going to do this big thing and we're all going to get together and celebrate. So we have, just FYI, we have a really great community over here in Page County called Unite Page. They're on Facebook. They have events every month, and allies like me come and join and have some fun mountain climbing or going to a winery, or just all kinds of things. Just FYI, it's not really that far. It is across a mountain, but it's not horribly far. So I hope that there'll be some kind of regional events also, which would be wonderful.
Ellen? And unless there's like a huge line, it's 11:30. So after Ellen, maybe we'll wrap up.
Thank you. I just want to echo what some others have said. I'm struck by the stories that you three have bravely shared. There's like an endless number of combinations of ways for people to express their gender identity and sexuality. And I think that's why these stories are so important, just to hear your struggles and your journeys. It just tells me there's always more for me to learn and appreciate, because the combinations are endless, and it's so enriching for me to hear people's journeys. So I honor each of you for sharing. Thank you so much.
All right, I didn't see any more raised hands, and since it's past 11:30, I'm gonna go ahead. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. The following benediction is Embodiment and Sexuality by Seth Carrier Ladd. Spirit of life and love, may we find appreciation today and in our lives for our embodiment. We are physical creatures, mind, spirit, and soul housed within our bodies. Our bodies, our physical form, allow us to experience the world. Taste, chocolate chip cookies warm from the oven. Touch, the warmth and smoothness of a baby's skin. Sight, the blossoming colors of sunrise and sunset. Sound, the laughter of friends and family. Smell, the aroma of fresh baked bread. In particular today, may we find gratitude for our sexuality. May we be grateful for and appreciate our gender identity, our sexual orientation, our physical selves. May we appreciate the pleasure, the intimacy, the connection that comes with and is part of our sexuality. May we also remember that for many, sexuality can bring a variety of emotions: shame, sadness, trauma, anger, pain, and hurt. For all the joy and goodness that embodiment brings, it also has its challenges: aching joints, long-term health conditions, severe illness, and more. Today, as we honor the whole of ourselves, we also honor the whole spectrum of sexual experience, holding the joys in all our richness and the sorrows in all their fullness in our hearts. Amen. Go in peace.